Jesus knew that there was going to be a tendency for his followers to resist change, to say, we've never done it that way before. You might ask your people, have you ever heard any church person say, we've never done it that way before? And Jesus knew we were going to have a tendency to say that. Raises the old question, how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is it takes 4. 1 to actually change the light bulb, and 3 to reminisce about how great the old light bulb was. The other answer to that question is, how many Baptists does it take to change a light bulb? Goes like this: change! Who said something about change? And we tend to resist change, and Jesus taught us that we ought not to be that way. We ought to be out-of-the-box thinkers. Jesus told us this parable about the wine and the wineskins, and there was one application of that parable that had to do with Jesus and the Pharisaical system of Judaism. But I think there's an enduring teaching of that parable that goes that it is a responsibility of every generation of believers to pour the unchanging wine of the gospel into changing wineskins. And we ought to be open to change, open to being out-of-the-box thinking. So let me show you a little diagram, and I want you to try to imagine that your assignment is to connect all 4 of these dots using 2 and only 2 lines that do not cross. They can intersect, but they cannot cross. Well, we could try it this way, and we see that the 2 lines cross but intersect, but they don't connect that 4th dot. Or we could do it this way in the case that we have the 2 lines crossing, so that violates our principle. But if we shrink this problem down to a smaller scale, we see that what has happened here is we put a box around the problem, and we have assumed that the solution is going to be within that box. And if you think outside of the box, we see that there is an easy solution. And it's true in many, many arenas in life. And the big idea we're going to look at today is kingdom people shrewdly think outside of the box. Kingdom people shrewdly think outside of the box. Here's our passage, Luke 16, starting with verse 1. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer. Or, as one translation has it,
you're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired. You're fired.
I think I've told you before, I read somewhere the saying that goes, it is the rare communicator who can communicate effectively without some use of humor. And anytime you can inject a little bit of humor, you're not here to be a stand-up comic, but anytime you can inject a little bit of humor in your class, you're ahead in doing so. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. So he thinks about 2 things that are inside the box. One thing that's inside the box is I could dig, but he says I'm not strong enough. I'm too old to do that, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, and could be translated, I've got an idea, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each one of the master's debtors. He asked the first, how much do you owe your master? 900 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 450. He cut it in half. Now, this is based on the law of reciprocation, and it's well documented in the literature on influence. And one of the ways to influence someone else is if I do something nice for you, if you're a normal person, there's a tendency for you to want to do something nice, to reciprocate. And he knew this was true. That's a principle he's taking an advantage of here. So he goes to a second one and he says, how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat. He replied, he told him, take your bill and make it 800. It didn't give him quite as good a deal. We don't know why, but anyway, he didn't. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. And this is on a series on why did Jesus say these things. And some people get hung up on why Jesus said this. And the point here is that Jesus is not